Forget everything Hollywood taught you about the Wild West. Those rugged, handsome cowboys with perfect teeth and spotless shirts? A complete and utter lie. Welcome to the real California gold rush of 1849. If you were a miner, you were likely covered in layers of freezing mud and pure regret. After standing in icy, fast-flowing rivers for 14 hours a day, a 49er might not take a proper bath for 6 agonizingly long, incredibly smelly months. You see, personal hygiene wasn't exactly a top priority when you were desperately trying to strike it rich and avoid starving in a lawless wilderness. Plus, the rivers were freezing meltwater from the Sierra Nevada mountains. Jumping in for a casual scrub meant risking hypothermia just to get slightly less brown. Many men actually convinced themselves that a thick crust of dirt and grease acted as a protective layer against the bitter cold and biting insects. Spoiler alert, it absolutely did not protect them. In fact, that crusty bodily armor became a luxurious 5-star breeding ground for all sorts of horrifying parasites. At the end of a grueling day, these exhausted prospectors simply collapsed into their moldy blankets without changing clothes, boots still caked in heavy clay. Imagine the accumulated sweat of a week's hard labor, baking under the California sun, then trapped inside a tiny, unventilated canvas tent with zero airflow. Hair care consisted of running greasy fingers through a matted nest of dust and sweat. Many stopped shaving entirely, growing massive, untamed beards that trapped food scraps. If you magically teleported a Hollywood star to an 1849 mining camp, the sheer, eye-watering stench of unwashed humanity would probably knock them unconscious instantly. Proper soap was a rare luxury, imported at outrageous prices. So, most miners just wiped their hands on their pants and called it a day. When they did bother to wash, it was a quick splash of dirty river water onto the face and hands, leaving the rest of the body untouched. This complete abandonment of basic sanitation wasn't just gross, it was a ticking biological time bomb waiting to detonate across the crowded California mining claims. But what happens when thousands of filthy, scratching men cram into tiny, unregulated camps and decide to share the exact same wash basin? Things get incredibly nasty. Welcome to the standard mining camp, a chaotic maze of moldy canvas tents packed tightly together in a sea of never-ending, foul-smelling brown sludge. In these overcrowded settlements, up to 50 exhausted men might have to share a single, pathetic tin wash basin outside their cramped log cabins. By the time the 10th person used it, the water wasn't just dirty. It was a thick, chunky soup of clay, sweat, and beard grease. Beside this horrific basin hung the communal camp towel. It was used by everyone and washed by absolutely no one, rapidly becoming dangerously stiff. Wiping your face with this stiff communal biohazard practically guaranteed you would walk away significantly dirtier than before you even attempted to wash up. But wait, it gets much worse. These makeshift mining camps had absolutely zero plumbing, no garbage disposal, and completely unregulated, non-existent waste management systems. Men simply dumped their food scraps, wastewater, and human waste directly onto the muddy ground right outside their incredibly cramped sleeping tents. So, when a miner walked through the camp after a heavy rainstorm, that thick brown sludge sucking at his boots was definitely not just mud. Cooking in this deeply unsanitary environment was an absolute nightmare. Utensils were practically never washed properly with clean water or sterilized in any way. Instead of scrubbing their dirty frying pans, miners usually just wiped out the thick leftover grease with a filthy rag or a crusty piece of bread. This lazy culinary habit meant that every new meal tasted faintly of yesterday's burnt bacon, mixed generously with blowing camp dust and buzzing flies. Imagine trying to enjoy your dinner while sitting just a few feet away from rotting garbage piles and the camp's unregulated open-air bathroom zone. In the movies, cowboys are always shown enjoying a hearty, delicious stew in a spotlessly clean saloon, served by a friendly bartender in a white shirt. In reality, a tired prospector was lucky if his rock-hard, fly-covered biscuit didn't shatter his teeth before he even had a chance to swallow it. Living closely together in this toxic soup of bacteria and bodily fluids was the perfect recipe for a massive, unstoppable medical disaster. What happened next? By month 3 in the camp, the toxic mixture of dirt, sweat, and shared blankets created a horrifying, microscopic army of flesh-eating invaders. It was widely known as the infamous miner's itch. In reality, this was a severe combination of rampant body lice and highly contagious scabies. The irritation was so unimaginably intense that grown men would violently scratch themselves until they bled, completely destroying their heavy woolen flannel shirts. Seeking medical help in 1849 was basically a death sentence. There were very few real doctors, mostly just greedy frauds selling poison. A frontier quack doctor would confidently mix toxic turpentine with bacon grease and charge an ounce of gold for this completely useless burning ointment. Applying this horrible chemical sludge didn't kill the tough camp lice, but it definitely burned the miner's skin, adding severe chemical burns to their misery. While the bugs mercilessly ate them alive from the outside, their terrible daily diet was silently destroying their fragile bodies from the inside out. For months on end, prospectors survived exclusively on heavily salted pork, dry flour biscuits, and an absolute zero amount of fresh fruits or vegetables. This total lack of vitamin C triggered a terrifying, slow-moving disaster known as scurvy, a disease usually reserved for starving sailors on long ocean voyages. First, a miner would notice strange dark bruises appearing on his legs. Then, his gums would swell up, turning a horrifying, sickly purple color. Soon, perfectly healthy teeth became incredibly loose. A simple bite into a soft piece of bread could suddenly leave half your smile stuck in the dough. Once again, the quack doctors offered terrible solutions, violently pulling out loose teeth with rusty iron pliers instead of simply telling them to eat potatoes. Scurvy also caused completely healed scars from old injuries to mysteriously reopen and bleed, terrifying the uneducated prospectors who thought they were literally rotting alive. Between the endless scratching, the chemical burns, falling teeth, and bleeding scars, the romanticized Gold Rush adventure was rapidly turning into a disgusting biological nightmare. Desperate to stop the horrible itching and the terrible smell, the miners finally realized they had to wash their clothes. But how do you wash clothes here? Laundry day in an 1849 mining camp wasn't exactly a relaxing weekend chore. It was a brutal, physically exhausting battle against stubborn, deeply embedded grease. Miners had to haul incredibly heavy wooden buckets of freezing river water back to camp, then build a massive fire just to boil the muddy liquid. Forget about gentle floral detergents. Prospectors relied on incredibly harsh, homemade lye soap, crudely manufactured by boiling leftover animal fat mixed with alkaline wood ash. This crude lye soap was basically a caustic chemical weapon. If mixed incorrectly, it was strong enough to completely strip the top layer of your skin. Men aggressively scrubbed their filthy garments in the boiling cauldrons, plunging their bare hands directly into the dangerously alkaline, burning hot, murky brown soapy water. After a few hours of intense scrubbing, a miner's hands would be left bright red, painfully cracked, and completely raw from the terrible chemical burns. The powerful lye didn't just hurt the men, it absolutely destroyed their clothes. The harsh chemicals rapidly broke down the fibers of their expensive wool shirts. Furthermore, boiling raw wool caused it to shrink dramatically. A large, muscular miner might pull out a clean shirt only to find it fitted a toddler. Because laundry was so incredibly painful, destructive, and exhausting, many prospectors simply decided to stop washing their clothes entirely, embracing the disgusting filth instead. Some extremely lazy men wore the exact same pair of long underwear every single day, until the fabric literally rotted away and fell off their bodies. Instead of washing, Miners frequently just threw their ruined, flea-infested garments directly into the mud, creating massive, stinking piles of rotting fabric scattered across the camps. Wealthier miners found an absolutely insane loophole. Local labor was so expensive that they actually shipped their dirty laundry on boats all the way to Hawaii. These rich prospectors would pay outrageous shipping fees and casually wait up to 4 long months just to get a single basket of clean shirts back. Thankfully, clever immigrant entrepreneurs soon opened local laundries in San Francisco, charging exorbitant amounts of gold dust to wash away the terrible mountain grime. But while their shirts were finally getting clean, the miners themselves were still absolutely covered in dirt. It was time for a desperately needed, incredibly expensive bath. As desperate miners fled the freezing rivers, they stumbled into the rapidly growing, chaotic city of San Francisco, searching for civilization and, more importantly, soap. Clever businessmen realized that mining the miners was much more profitable than digging for gold, so they quickly established the city's very first primitive bathhouses. These establishments were usually just flimsy wooden shacks containing a few cast-iron bathtubs, but to a filthy prospector, they looked like absolute heaven. Cleanliness came at an astronomical price. A single simple hot bath could easily cost a large pinch of pure gold dust, a massive fortune back then. Bathhouse owners strictly weighed every single grain of gold, smiling greedily as they traded a few gallons of heated water for a miner's hard-earned treasure. However, hauling fresh water and chopping firewood was exhausting work, so these greedy owners invented a highly questionable, heavily tiered pricing system. If you were wealthy and arrived early, you paid top dollar for the glorious, crystal-clear first water of the morning. It was a true luxury. But if you were broke and arrived late in the afternoon, you paid a heavily discounted rate to soak in someone else's leftover bathwater. By the time the 10th customer climbed into the tub, the water was practically a thick, lukewarm soup of brown clay and floating beard hair. Imagine happily paying your precious gold dust just to sit in a bathtub that looked exactly like the freezing mud puddle you had just escaped. Yet, these exhausted men were so desperate for warmth that they happily soaked in the disgusting brown sludge, closing their eyes in pure, ignorant bliss. The most luxurious bathhouses, like the famous Pioneer steam baths, offered premium packages including a haircut, a shave, and occasionally a somewhat clean towel. The barber's chair was a magical place where massive, tangled, flea-infested beards were finally chopped off, revealing pale, shocked faces underneath all that thick grease. A miner would walk in looking like a terrifying swamp monster and confidently strut out looking like a respectable, handsome, fully civilized human being again. It was a miraculous physical transformation. But in a world completely paved with mud and disease, just how long could this expensive cleanliness possibly last? The answer was usually about 5 minutes. A single passing carriage could instantly splash a newly scrubbed miner with a fresh layer of toxic street sludge. Ultimately, the true price of California gold wasn't measured on a brass scale. It was paid in terrible skin diseases, falling teeth, and unrelenting itchiness. Historians estimate that many more prospectors died from rampant illnesses caused by terrible sanitation than from dramatic Western shootouts or tragic mining accidents. The Wild West wasn't conquered by fearless, pistol-spinning heroes. It was survived by incredibly stubborn men who simply learned to tolerate the unbearable stench. They endured freezing mud, shared a single disgusting wash basin, fought off microscopic armies, and burned their own hands with homemade chemical soap. And the guys who actually got filthy rich. It wasn't the hard-working diggers. It was the smart entrepreneurs selling them overpriced beans, fresh shirts, and warm water. Not to mention the terrible quack doctors who made a massive fortune selling literal poison to men desperate to cure their completely preventable skin diseases. When you finally look past the glowing Hollywood romance, the grand gold rush was actually a giant, incredibly dangerous, biohazardous camping trip gone horribly wrong. So, the next time you watch a Western movie and see a spotless cowboy casually leaning against a polished bar, remember the disgusting historical truth. If he really stepped out of the 1849 gold rush, you wouldn't just see him walking into town, you would definitely smell him first. He would probably be scratching his armpits, missing half his teeth from severe scurvy, and wearing clothes that could technically stand up all by themselves. The pioneers who built this era sacrificed their health, their teeth, and their dignity, all for the small hope of finding a few yellow rocks. It is a testament to human endurance, showing what people will suffer through when they are blinded by the powerful, intoxicating promise of sudden wealth. Let's all just take a moment to deeply appreciate indoor plumbing, modern antibiotics, and the absolute miracle that is a cheap, mass-produced bar of gentle soap. Thanks for watching this filthy dive into history. Don't forget to wash your hands, hit that like button, and subscribe for more shockingly true historical tales.